Thank you all so much for joining us today to celebrate 35 years of the Herbert Scoville Jr. Peace Fellowship. My name is Kelsey Davenport, and I currently serve as the Director for Nonproliferation Policy at the Arms Control Association, an organization that Dr. Scoville was critical in helping to establish. I started my career at ACA as a Scoville Fellow in the fall of 2011. For me, like so many others, it was a pathway to DC to work in the peace and security field that ended up transforming my life. The fellowship helped me find a role and a voice in the important work to abolish nuclear weapons and a community that shared my passions. In the 10 years since, I've had the opportunity to serve as a mentor and a supervisor for other Scoville Fellows, and since 2016, to serve on the board of directors for the Scoville Fellowship. All of these experiences continue to demonstrate to me the critical role that the fellowship plays in creating a more diverse and inclusive peace and security community. Bringing new voices from all over the country interjects new ideas and a range of perspectives that are critical for making progress on some of the seemingly intractable challenges that our communities face. So it's my privilege to co-host this event in honor of Dr. Scoville's legacy, to celebrate the contributions of more than 200 fellows, and to ensure that the fellowship continues to provide a pathway to Washington, DC for recent graduates committing to building a more peaceful world. And with that, let me introduce my co-host for this evening's event, the current president of the Scoville Fellowship, Stephen Miles.
Thank you, Kelsey. It's a pleasure to be hosting tonight's celebration of Scoville's past, present, and future alongside you. As Kelsey mentioned, it's my distinct honor to be currently serving as the president of the Scoville Fellowship. Over the past decade, I've had the pleasure to work alongside amazing Scoville alum like Kelsey, watching them literally help shape US foreign policy and national security. For the past several years, I've also been fortunate enough to work directly with many Scoville Fellows, first as the executive director of Win Without War, a proud Scoville host organization, then as a board member and mentor, and finally now as president. Working on peace and security issues in Washington, DC can sometimes be depressing business, but nothing, absolutely nothing makes me more hopeful for the future than the amazing, inspiring, and powerful leaders I get to meet each and every cohort of new Scoville Fellows.
We're so excited that you've decided to spend this evening with us. Coming up, you'll hear from members of Congress, Scoville board members and partners, and most importantly, from current and former fellows. We'll also have a celebrity make an appearance, or as my co-host would like to say, a famous friend. And you'll get to hear about some of the amazing work that fellows are doing, what they've contributed to this community, and what the future holds.
But first, we're going to start with a little bit about Scoville's past. Tonight, as we mark 35 years of the Scoville Fellowship, I'm excited to bring on our virtual stage one of our proud Scoville alum, a former Scoville board member, and a dear friend, Rachel Stoll.
Thank you, Stephen. My name is Rachel Stoll. I currently serve as Vice President of Programs at the Stimson Center. I came to Washington as a Scoville Fellow in 1997, planning to stay in DC for the 6 months of my fellowship. But the Scoville Fellowship changed my plans and changed my life. 24 years later, I remain in Washington, still doing the work that the fellowship brought me here to do. The Scoville Fellowship gave me a solid foundation in policy work and introduced me to an amazing community of dedicated individuals and organizations committed to ensuring the legacy of Pete Scoville. In the intervening years, I have kept the Scoville Fellowship close to my heart. I have only ever worked for Scoville host organizations. I have served as a mentor to fellows, have supervised fellows during their fellowships, and for the last 13 years have served on the Scoville Fellowship Board. I am proud to be part of Pete Scoville's legacy and honored to have worked with so many amazing and talented fellows and incredible board members in the last quarter century. I think what makes the Scoville Fellowship so unique is that its core mission is to recruit and train the next generation of policy and advocacy leaders on a range of international peace and security issues. It has kept true to that mission since it was established in 1987. You'll hear more about Pete Scoville in a moment, but the fellowship honors the longtime nuclear arms control activists who encourage young people to become more involved in arms control and national security. Pete Scoville was a dedicated public servant who promoted international peace, security, and cooperation. The 26 partner organizations of the Scoville Fellowship exemplify that spirit and give young people the opportunity to gain valuable experience on these issues and to build expertise and resolve global conflicts. The fellowship provides a unique professional experience to those that might not have the opportunity to work on peace and security issues in Washington, D.C. I would not be the person I am, nor be in the position I am in today without the Scoville Fellowship. I hope as you listen tonight, you'll be inspired by the stories you hear and join me in making a donation to the fellowship. Donations may be given through the website, scoville.org, or through the fellowship's Facebook page. Of course, you can always write a check or even email info@scoville.org with any questions regarding contributions. And just so you know, the Scoville Fellowship is a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. I promise you, your donation will provide opportunities for more young people to come to Washington and help sustain the fellowship for the next 35 years. It is now my distinct privilege to introduce a few special messages from those involved with the Scoville Fellowship from its earliest days.
Hello, my name is John Isaacs, and to steal a line from Dean Acheson, former Secretary of State, I was present at the creation of the Scoville Peace Fellowship. No, it was not my idea to establish the fellowship. The idea came from Chad Dobson, who had come from Utah to D.C. area to work and manage the MX campaign in which Pete Scoville was very active. Pete provided us with his experience, his knowledge of nuclear issues, his wisdom, and his fine reputation in this campaign and many others. I went with Chad to visit Pete in the hospital during his last illness to discuss the idea, and Pete Scoville, not surprisingly, enthusiastically endorsed the campaign in his name. I also served on the board of the Scoville Fellowship for some 30 years or so, a program that's produced many sharp Scoville Fellows that have been active in years past and continue to be active in the arms control community and other activist communities. Fortunately, many of these Scoville Fellows came to work with me at Council for Livable World and Center for Arms Control and Nonproliferation, all of whom had to go through a rigorous application and interview process. It's a delight to me that Pete Scoville's fine work has continued 35 years after his death. Thank you.
I am Jacob Scher. I'm a former member of the board and president of the Scoville Peace Fellowship program. I remember meeting Pete for the first time in the mid-1970s, and I must say, if it's possible for the arms control to have had a rock star, that would have been Pete. He was both a model and a mentor for me and many other young advocates and activists. It is absolutely wonderful to see that his legacy lives on in this fellowship program, which now has provided an opportunity for literally hundreds of young people to come to Washington and to become engaged in these critical issues of national security and international peace.
Pete Scoville never missed an opportunity to engage young people in national security issues. I wish Pete could have met 1989 Scoville Fellow Daryl Kimball. Daryl is now Executive Director of the Arms Control Association, a group Pete helped establish and was president of. I saw Daryl's smarts and political savvy at Physicians for Social Responsibility. There, as a young professional, Daryl spearheaded efforts to win congressional approval for the 1992 nuclear test moratorium. As a result of this congressional action, the United States has not conducted a nuclear test in almost 30 years. It's an achievement Daryl and the Scoville Fellow Program can rightly claim credit for. Pete would be so proud.
Wow, it's so powerful being reminded of the history that comes with the past 35 years. As the current and 8th Scoville president, I'd like to quickly recognize my predecessors who've left some extremely big shoes to fill, starting with Chad Dobson, who helped found the fellowship, Kevin Knobloch, Ann Kahn, Tom Wander, Jacob Scher, Bob Musel, and Deborah Rosenblum. I'd like to recognize the dozens of individuals additionally who have given their time as members of the board of directors through the years. From its earliest days, Scoville has been driven by a combination of the dedicated service of volunteers who've helped shape and guide the fellowship and the amazing talent of our fellows. All that work has led to the Scoville Fellowship developing, as Kelsey pointed out, some famous friends. And one of them sent along a short message to help us celebrate tonight.
Hey, Scoville fellows, past and present, Scoville family members, board members, and supporters, thanks for being here. Bradley Whitford here. Pete Scoville's vision of a safer world for us all has changed the face of peace and security. Happy 35 years of success and growth for the fellowship, and here's to 35 more.
So I've seen firsthand how the Scoville Fellowship has influenced the actual West Wing. And now I guess it's good to know we've had some impact on the fictional West Wing as well. But looking at the Scoville Fellowship, we would not be the program we are today without the generous support of some of the critical foundations and organizations working in the peace and security field. We've benefited tremendously from groups including the Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Nuclear Threat Initiative, the New Land Foundation, Rockefeller Financial Services, and Plowshares Fund. Tonight, we're honored to share a message from Dr. Emma Belcher, president of Plowshares Fund, to hear why Plowshares has supported the fellowship since the very beginning.
Good evening. I'm thrilled to join you all virtually in the celebration of 35 years of the Herbert Scoville Jr. Peace Fellowship and to honour Dr. Scoville's legacy. Plowshares Fund is a long-time supporter of the Scoville Fellowship, making its first grant to the fellowship in 1986, in the lead up to the first cohort of fellows in 1987. At Plowshares, we work to reduce and eventually eliminate nuclear weapons. To accomplish this goal, it's key that we have next-generation thought leaders entering our community. And that's why we help fund the Scoville Fellowship. Over the past 35 years, we've seen hundreds of incredible, talented people leave their mark on the world through this program. Scoville funnels dynamic new talent into the nuclear policy community, keeping the field fresh, innovative, and open-minded. Without an injection of new voices, our community could become static and ineffective. And the Scoville Fellowship not only brings in new voices, but also diverse voices. A diverse community, in the nuclear space specifically, is imperative as we work to address the disproportionate effects of nuclear weapons, both here in the United States and around the world. The program helps turn today's fellows into tomorrow's leaders. Several past fellows have gone on to become major voices advocating for nuclear disarmament in the media and in Congress, and we can truly say that our field is stronger and more inclusive thanks to the Scoville Fellowship. The Fellowship continues to be an important program in supporting the health of the peace and security field and inviting in new perspectives on nuclear policy. We at Plowshares are proud supporters of this program, and we look forward to welcoming new fellows into our community in the years to come.
Thank you so much to the Plowshares Fund for their long and dedicated support. And a very special thank you to Dr. Belcher for sharing those very kind words with us tonight. We're so very grateful for the support from the Plowshares Fund and indeed from all of our supporters and donors. Without you, there simply would be no Scoville Fellowship.
Now we're going to hear from a very special guest. The Scoville Fellowship Board has been honored to include members of Dr. Scoville's family over the years. We're thrilled to have Dr. Scoville's grandson, Adam Scoville, currently serving on the board and joining us this evening to make a very special announcement.
Hi, good evening. So Pete Scoville was of a generation of scientists who were involved in what was then called the atomic weapons program, who quickly became aware of their awesome power and their potential for destruction on a scale that no one had appreciated. As early as 1954, while he was with the CIA, he called for negotiating a nuclear test ban treaty, and he went on to be a leader at the CIA and at the National Reconnaissance Office in satellite reconnaissance, and one of the originators of some of the verification methods that were used to ensure compliance with later arms control treaties. From the time he left the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency until his death in 1985, he was a staunch advocate and because of that scientific and government background, he was a credible voice for nuclear arms control. But to me, he was Grandpa Pete. And it wasn't until well after his death that I came to fully appreciate the dedication that he'd shown and the role that he played. As John Isaacs noted, the Scoville Peace Fellowship was founded by peers and colleagues with the support of foundations and other organizations that took, inspiration from Pete's work. They saw that his record of recognizing how critical it is to bring new generations into the peace and security and arms control fields could be a rallying cry to make that possible going forward. So you see, the Scoville Fellowship was never some kind of family foundation. We didn't fund it, endow it, and we can't take credit for it. But I and my Aunt Molly Fitzmaurice and Uncle Tom Scoville have been honored to serve on the board to do what we can to help preserve and further its mission. And so I'm all the more pleased to let you know that over 15 Scoville family members, including all of Pete's grandchildren and at least one of his great-grandchildren, have come together to donate over $57,000 in amounts ranging from tens of dollars to $10,000 to the Scoville Peace Fellowship at this critical time, which coincides with its 35th anniversary. And I really hope that those of you who are listening and maybe your organizations can join us in supporting the fellowship now, this year, and into the future.
Adam, on behalf of the entire Scoville board, let me offer a tremendous thank you to you and the entire Scoville family for your generous support. It's been an honor to carry on your grandfather's legacy. And I know I speak for all of us when I say that this gift will help us set the stage for another 35 years.
I sure
Since
hope
we
so.
have you here with us tonight, I'd actually love if you could spend a few minutes, and we'd love to ask you a few questions. I've been very lucky to have the privilege to get to know you over the last couple of years, as you mentioned, working on the Scoville board, and indeed more recently as a member of our newly formed executive committee. Now, you've obviously known about the fellowship for a long time, but I'm a little curious now that you've been able to spend some more time working closely with the fellowship and of course the fellows. I'm curious how your understanding of our work has changed.
Yeah, Stephen. Well, first of all, it's been truly just totally awe-inspiring, the incredible volume and the quality of the applicants that we get for the Scoville Fellowship. As you know, in some rounds, we've had over 200 or nearly 300 applicants for a few or, kind of just a small handful of fellowships. What's least obvious from the outside is that this is truly a working board. Nearly all of the board members are in the international peace and security field, and the main activity of the board is in its thoughtfully reviewing and discussing all of those amazing applications and applicants and sort of kind of winnowing them down over multiple rounds to the finalists, who then come and meet with our host organizations and interview with the board for fellowships. And second, I think the next thing that's impressed me is the really pivotal role that the fellowship plays for these applicants. Sometimes it comes down to their individual stories. Some have kind of this deep interest in peace and security issues, but they're far away and they don't have exposure to Washington, and they just have no idea kind of how to get a foothold from where they are, disconnected from some of these issues and where they're happening. How to get a foothold in the field or with organizations who are doing this work that they feel so passionate about. For them, the critical piece is kind of getting them here, getting them to DC. Others are very talented candidates who have an interest in peace and security among other different fields, who are considering those as well. And for them, kind of we can be critical in helping them maybe choose this as a potential path to make a career in peace and security. So some really significant, roles there for different kinds of applicants. And one more thing, I think, because by and large, we're a board made up of people in the field, and the biggest kind of part of our work is selecting the fellows. Quite honestly, I've come to understand that kind of we can use all the help we can get. For example, I hope that what I lack in knowledge of the field, I'm able to make up for in helping on governance issues. My personal background is that I'm a general counsel of a public company. We need all of these pieces of help from different areas.
Adam, let me echo Stephen's thanks to you and your family for this incredibly generous gift. I mean, I can certainly say I'm not sure I would have found my way to DC, without the Scoville Fellowship. So very, very grateful. But in addition to celebrating these past 35 years of the fellowship, we're also here tonight to look to the future. So could you tell us a little bit about how you would like to see this fellowship evolve and really continue to play a role in shaping a more peaceful world?
Yeah, sure. And first of all, Kelsey, we're really glad you're here. From the start of the fellowship, when it was kind of very focused on nuclear arms control, the fellowship's mission and its scope has broadened. And I think that this just sort of naturally reflects the huge variety of threats that we have to international peace and security now, from climate-driven conflicts to sort of radical nationalism to cyber warfare. We continue to, and of course, I'm sure we always will have a strong presence in placing fellows in the nuclear field. But, we're also placing fellows in organizations in other critical areas to peace and security. That's a natural evolution of the Scoville Fellowship's role. And, I think looking forward towards the future and talking about the gifts that we were making, our family sort of wanted to put out a bit of a friendly challenge to all of you in the, I guess what I might call the sort of the broader Scoville family. We have a lot of Scoville Fellowship alumni who are in the peace and security field. And the role that some of them can and are playing in helping us select fellows and so forth is obvious. But we also have a lot of alumni who've gone on to other fields, and we would love your help too. First of all, of course, as has been mentioned here, to help support the fellowship financially so that we can be assured of, continuing to be able to provide these opportunities and kind of this pipeline of new talent into the international peace and security field. But, particularly for our alumni and others who are interested, perhaps even more important is to help us out in other ways that can help us mature and become more sustainable as an organization in the long term, as a potential member of the board, or to lend your expertise in other ways. Whether that expertise, I'm a lawyer, and as I said, I know the governance side of things, but whether that's communications to help us kind of get the word out to potential applicants, which is a constant sort of job, or expertise in development and fundraising and grant writing. All of these are critical pieces of expertise that we don't always have on the board. And like I said, we can use all the help we can get. And I'm convinced that among the incredible array of Scoville alumni, there are many who may not have realized that there could be a really important role that you could play in giving back.
Adam, I want to thank you one more time on behalf of the entire Scoville Fellowship Board. I just want to thank you and the entire family for this generous gift. Your continued support of the fellowship, both through volunteering your time and your generous financial support, is a tremendous legacy in and of itself. And those of us involved in the fellowship, I know we are so proud to carry on this important work in Pete Scoville's honor.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. We're, there was a lot of us involved in it, and we're so happy to do it and to see the fellowship continue.
Yes, thanks again, Adam. And I will take you up on your challenge and make my own donation, probably as soon as this is over, because I don't think I can multitask well enough to host and donate. But thank you again to you and your family. So now we'd like to shift and talk a little bit about what work has looked like for the Scoville Fellowship over the past 35 years, what real contributions have been made. You've already heard about how the fellowship was formed, and its earliest days. But in the past 3.5 decades, we've been able to award more than 200 fellowships. Those fellows have come from 34 different states and graduated from 122 different universities. And their collective impact on the peace and security field really is immeasurable.
Indeed, Scoville Fellows have worked with one of more than 24 host organizations. And I'd like to take a moment now just to pause and acknowledge and thank all of those organizations, all the staff who supervise fellows, and everyone who helps make the fellowship work throughout those organizations. You can see a full list of our host organizations on our brand new website, scoville.org. And yes, that's right, we do have a brand new website, scoville.org. When we're done here this evening, I encourage you to go check it out. It's absolutely beautiful. Scoville Fellows really are an amazing collection of leaders and experts doing some truly important work on the biggest challenges we face. But you don't have to take my word for it. In preparation for tonight's event, we reached out to many Scoville Fellows, current and former, as well as Scoville board members and other friends, asking them to share some of their experiences with the fellowship and what makes it so special. I want to thank everyone who submitted a video, but I want to acknowledge that while we'd love to play all of the videos we received, we'd be here for a really, really long time because so many people wanted to share so many great stories about how the Scoville Fellowship has changed their lives and what it means to them. You'll be able to find many of those videos either on our new website, scoville.org, or on our social media accounts, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We hope you'll watch all of them in time, but for now, we'd like to share just a few highlights from 5 of our current or former fellows, as well as our colleague on the board, Toby Dalton. Now, these videos will be about 8 minutes long, so now's a good time to sit back, relax, and enjoy these powerful messages.
I think 3 things that really set the Scoville Fellowship apart are, 1, the substantive policy work you get to do. You get to engage on issues you're passionate about, have a meaningful impact, and you get to do that at a really, an early stage of your career, which sets you up for all sorts of career opportunities down the road. Second, I would say the mentorship really sets the Scoville Fellowship apart. You don't have to do it alone. There's a whole slew of alumni like myself and board members who are so passionate about giving back to the community and making sure that the up-and-coming class has guidance, and they're there to answer questions and help you kind of sort things out, both from a professional standpoint and from just settling into DC. And third, I would say the Scoville Fellowship takes fellowship very seriously. It is a community. You get a bunch of friends, people who are interested in all sorts of cool things and come from all sorts of interesting backgrounds, and you just there's an instant connection, and it's really exciting in that way. And I am very close to my co-fellows. Shout out to James and Allie. And I think that just sets the fellowship apart. It's a professional opportunity. You get to do a lot of meaningful work, but you also make lifelong friends. So the fellowship's great. I owe a lot of what I have to the fellowship, and I'm just so grateful to have been able to be a part of it and to continue to be a part of the Scoville Fellowship in general.
For me, the Scoville Fellowship was an amazing opportunity to get started in DC and work in nuclear policy. It was especially helpful because I had a technical background studying at MIT, and I was looking for ways to sort of move into the policy world. But I wasn't really finding a lot of people who had similar interests at my school. So the Scoville gave me the opportunity to find a new community that could support me and help me with that transition to working more on policy issues.
When I decided to apply for the Scoville, it was a bit of a leap of faith. The plan was always to go to law school, but in my last year of college, I discovered this nexus between tech and national security. The fellowship allowed me to explore this research interest fully. Looking back, it was probably one of the best decisions I could have made. Not only do they pair you with organizations throughout DC of unparalleled stature, the funding that Scoville gives you provides a lot of flexibility in how you spend your time during the fellowship. In my case, I had a chance to lead my own project, which meant writing reports, doing interviews, appearing on podcasts, and thinking about how to get these ideas into the right hands in government. All of those experiences made me a much better policy entrepreneur and researcher today. Now, the last thing I'll say is that the Scoville network is incredibly supportive. Whether it's having someone to reach out to for career advice, or just having someone to go to happy hour with, it really helps to have so many friends so passionate about what they do at all stages of life, especially in a place like DC. I could not recommend the Scoville opportunity more, and I hope you consider it.
I applied for the Scoville Fellowship because I wanted to work in the field of peace and security. As a Syrian American Muslim, I grew up seeing how the decisions made in the security field directly impacted my community. But I didn't see myself, my family, or other frontline communities adequately represented in those spaces. So I wanted to enter the peace and security field to change that. But I wasn't entirely sure where to start or how to get access into Washington, D.C., which seemed so isolated, insular, and distant from where I lived and studied in the Midwest. The Scoville Fellowship gave me that access, not only by allowing me to actually work in Washington, D.C., but also giving me great insight into the actual landscape of the peace and security field.
I've always been drawn to peace and conflict issues, and while earlier in my education I was most interested in approaching these topics from the state and governmental level, in the course of pursuing my master's, I came increasingly to see the need for conflict and the dynamics which fuel it to be addressed at the ground level. The Scoville Fellowship and the organizations that enables one to work with offered me a really unique opportunity to, right at the beginning of my career, begin doing critical peace-building work that address conflict at its roots. The fellowship has given me the opportunity to engage in meaningful, substantive peace-building work, such as contributing to Search's advocacy, which was critical for securing OFAC general licenses for continued humanitarian programming in Afghanistan. And this work gave me a really unique window into how policy and advocacy processes work in practice that I don't think I could have gained anywhere but working with an operational organization.
I think that my time as a Scoville Fellow really taught me how academic researchers and policymakers can work together to find solutions for peace and security issues. When I was at AFP, I was able to work on several projects that drew on both policy and academic research to understand what works for violence reduction and countering violent extremism. And as a graduate student, I think the work that I did at AFP has allowed me to understand how to make my own research policy relevant. Because of my time as a Scoville and the subsequent job I had at the National Endowment for Democracy in DC, I've been given several opportunities in grad school to continue to work with policymakers at organizations like the World Bank and the United States Institute of Peace. Going into graduate school and in applying for the Scoville, one of my major goals was to help bridge that gap between academics and policymakers. And I think because of Scoville, I'm much better placed to do that.
Making concrete strides to diminish violence, foster peace, or reduce weapons of mass destruction requires creativity, positivity, and boundless energy. And we look to the Scoville Fellows to bring these attributes to the institutions at which they serve, to inject new ideas, to draw on their own experiences, and ultimately to find their own unique ways to benefit the peace and security community, whether by coming up with new policy approaches toward conflict-prone regions, conducting deep research and analysis on emerging technologies, or advocating for change in U.S. laws and practices. All of these are topics that Scoville institutions work on and benefit greatly from the expertise, the energy, and the talent of Scoville Fellows.
Hello, my name is Rob Golan-Vilea. I was a 2010 Scoville Fellow at the Arms Control Association and am currently a lawyer in Washington, D.C.
And my name is Allie Van Dyne, and I was a 2014 Fellow at NTI, and I'm also now a lawyer in Washington, D.C.
I would encourage absolutely anyone who is interested to apply to the Scoville Fellowship for so many reasons, but especially because of the great community of people that you get to meet and be connected with along with the fellowship.
Some of my favorite moments in Washington, D.C. have been sitting and discussing everything from current events to professional opportunities to our personal lives with my fellow fellows. And I did meet my future husband at a Scoville alumni happy hour in the basement of Beer Baron.
And I met my future wife, Allie, at that same happy hour.
Thanks
Scoville!
From starting careers to starting marriages, it's clear that Scoville continues to have tremendous impact.
And while I admit I didn't meet my husband at a Scoville happy hour, I did meet him in DC. So had I not made it to DC on a Scoville fellowship, that may not have happened either. We've already heard tonight from so many voices representing many different parts of the extended Scoville family. But we also want to demonstrate the real impact that Scoville Fellows have on policy. So next up, we're excited to share messages from two members of Congress to hear about how they've benefited from the critical work being done by current and former fellows.
Hello, I'm Senator Ed Markey, and I'm proud to join you to commemorate 35 years of the Scoville Fellowship, named for Dr. Herbert Scoville, just a great man who for so many decades I relied upon for guidance, for leadership. He dedicated his career to crafting arms control treaties that staved off nuclear war, and each year's class of fellows has followed in his lifetime of work to help lift the nuclear sword of Damocles that hangs over each of our heads on this planet. The Scoville Fellowship was the first professional gig in the peace and security field for many of the 200 fellows placed over the years, but certainly not the last. Alumni are scattered across officers here on the Hill, in the halls of academia, and in the inner sanctum of Foggy Bottom and the Pentagon. More than ever, we need the efforts of the Scoville Fellowship to conquer the essential threats that our planet faces, from the climate crisis to the ever-present threat from nuclear weapons. Congratulations again on your 35 years. Herb Scoville was just an historic leader, and everything that you're doing just helps to contribute to that legacy, that much needed legacy, especially in a world that is still threatened by nuclear weapons. Thank you for all of the work which you do.
Hi, everyone. I'm Congressman Andy Kim from New Jersey, and I just wanted to take a moment to just congratulate the Scoville Fellowship community. It's incredible what you've been able to do to give opportunities to young Americans to be able to pursue careers in service, to understand what it means to serve, to work in these types of jobs, both inside and outside of government, that are trying to pursue our common goals, our shared beliefs, and our values as a country. I think that this is one of the most noble and important things we can do. I don't have to tell you all the challenges that we face as a nation. We have a plethora of enormous challenges ahead of us. But what we know is that the best solution to address these always starts at making sure that we can have the kind of talent, the kind of dedication to service in our country. When I worked at the State Department, as many of you know, I was a career public servant. I had a boss tell me that you don't have good government unless you have good people working in government. And so it starts by just building it up person by person, commitment to be able to serve our country and that greater cause and recognize that we're part of something bigger than all of us. You are giving that opportunity and have been doing that. So congratulations, keep it up, and I look forward to continuing to work with all of you. Take care.
So wonderful to hear from Senator Markey and Congressman Kim, and thank them for their gracious remarks. You know, through the years, especially in the before times, we often held these annual celebrations in person, and we were fortunate enough to hear from many members of Congress and administration officials. It was always exciting to hear from powerful leaders, but the truth is the real stars of the show have always been the Scoville Fellows themselves. Just how exceptional are our fellows? Over the past several years, we have accepted less than 2% of applicants. Scoville Fellows are truly some of the most talented leaders of their generation. And that's why, for tonight's very special anniversary, we thought we'd have a very special keynote featuring 3 of our amazing fellows.
Now, it's a real pleasure for me to introduce these fellows and bring them into our conversation. So first, we have Ari Talani. Ari was a fall 2020 fellow at the Stimson Center working on their South Asia program, and she completed her fellowship earlier this year. I have to say, personally, I benefited from Ari's insights into Iran in particular, and I'm proud to say that she is now a program officer at the Center for Civilians in Conflict. Joining Ari, we have Christopher Coletta, a spring 2021 fellow. He is nearing the end of his fellowship at the Nuclear Threat Initiative, where he's worked on nuclear policy issues primarily in East Asia. And last, but certainly not least, I'm thrilled to welcome Maggie Chambers. Maggie just started her fellowship at Women's Action for New Directions Education Fund, where she's working on nuclear weapons policy issues. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. It's a real pleasure to have you here. And I'd like to start by giving you each a little bit of a chance to tell us about your journey to Scoville. What attracted you to the fellowship? What attracted you to a career in peace and security? And what convinced you to apply? So Maggie, if we could start with you.
Yes, thank you all so much for inviting me to speak. It was, being a Scoville has been a surprise nonetheless, but I'm super excited to be here. Just to give paint a little bit of a picture, in the fall of the pandemic, I had lost my job. I was supposed to have an internship that did not happen because I go to school in DC. So I decided to join the Future First Fellowship with Beyond the Bomb. Shout out to Tristan and Cicely, they're on the call. And I found it through the Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security listserv. So I was just checking my email. As I was working as a Future First Fellow, I fell in love with the intersectionality of nuclear weapons. I was a business major prior to working with Beyond the Bomb, studied international business actually, and I saw the overlay of everyday issues, whether that be healthcare, climate change, affecting marginalized communities, how all of those things work together. And so it was a great break from my typical business scene where I worked with, suits every day. But I also realized that you cannot have business or have a strong economy without peace in a country. And if there's a constant threat of nuclear security, there's no way to have peace. And so I learned about Scoville through my connections at Beyond the Bomb. And as a soon-to-be college grad, I told everyone I was just throwing spaghetti to the wall, seeing what sticks. And I didn't have a lot of knowledge of the area, but I was really excited at how welcoming the Scoville family was. And I threw my hat in the ring, and the rest was history.
Thanks so much, Maggie. We'll come back to you in a second, but first I'd like to turn over to Christopher. Christopher, you have an unusual journey. Your journey took you from the U.S. Army to a peace fellowship, and that's pretty fascinating. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what brought you here.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Christopher Coletta. Although it was a couple of years ago, I guess I came closer to the sharp end of nuclear weapons policy than most people my age. After my undergraduate years, I commissioned to the U.S. Army, and I went on 2 separate 9-month deployments to South Korea. I served in the 1st Cavalry Division, and we were just a few miles south of the DMZ. So I had the dubious honor of mobilizing my soldiers repeatedly in response to numerous missile and nuclear weapons tests. And so it seems pretty obvious that gave me a pretty good initial understanding of the danger posed by nuclear weapons. I was going to get out of the Army, so when I was deciding what to do with my post-Army life, I kind of stumbled on the effective altruism community and the idea of having as much of a positive impact on the world as possible with what time you have in your career. As I was poking around their resources, I saw nuclear security when reading their assessments of the world's highest priority problem areas. And I just kind of realized I found my issue. Just lined up with my previous experience really well. So to get started, I applied to graduate school, which was in Paris, and unsurprisingly, it turned out to be a major quality of life upgrade as well. And I kind of tailored my course load accordingly to study nuclear issues. So I had the privilege as well of graduating in the summer of 2020, mid-pandemic, and things were a little crazy for people entering the job markets, but I wanted to move simply from studying nuclear policy to working on the problem directly. After a few months, I managed to land the Scoville Fellowship, and here I am speaking to you from the Nuclear Threat Initiative in DC.
Thank you, Christopher. That's quite a fascinating journey. And I actually remember interviewing you when you applied. As someone who works on North Korea, I said to hear about your experiences in the military on the Korean Peninsula, it really also drove home the importance of this work in that region. So we're thrilled to have your perspective and your experience in this community. I'd now like to turn to you, Ari. You finished your fellowship earlier this year. You've started on the next step of your career. But can you look back a little bit and tell us, what brought you to the fellowship in 2020?
Of course. So I stand in solidarity here with my fellow pandemic graduates. So I was especially thankful to Scoville for making sure that I was able to sort of safely enter the job market. So when I applied for Scoville, I was at the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. I was in graduate school, and I had spent the past 4 years studying Farsi Dari and West Asian history. Over time, I realized how deeply United States imperial policy had driven civilian harm, violence and conflict, and strategic instability throughout the world, and particularly in the region that I studied. I realized I wanted to stop just studying this, and I wanted to work in advocacy and find a way to make proactive changes to improve US policy. And so as I was going through this application process, I think I got around 60 rejections for jobs in peace and security. I realized, I was a little nobody from Texas, and I did not have the connections that I needed to make it in this field. I also, I'm not in the habit of working for free, so I didn't have any unpaid internships. I didn't have anything that was connecting me to that field. I didn't know anybody who worked in peace and security. I didn't know anybody who lived in DC. And the only folks I did know who worked in security were weapons manufacturers in Texas. I had also never really heard of arms control. I didn't really know it was an option for me. But I was hoping that I could make the case to Scoville that the cultural, historical, and linguistic training that I had done in graduate school could allow me to make a more compassionate and effective way to influence United States policy. Scoville was a Hail Mary that I am frankly still shocked paid off, but I am really grateful that it did because it set me on my career and put me in contact with folks like Kelsey who were able to provide mentorship and networking that was 100% not accessible to me otherwise.
All right, we're all pretty excited that Hail Mary worked out too. And we're so excited to see you not just having flourished as a fellow, but as we said, now have taken this first next step in your career. I'd love if you could say a little bit more about how the fellowship helped you take that step and help you launch into your career in the peace and security fields and prepare you for your current role at Civic.
100%. So when we hear about the lack of diversity or the lack of accessibility in arms control and peace and security, when we hear about why there's no working class women, why there's an insufficient number of women of color, of queer women, we hear that there's a pipeline problem. And I think what Scoville really helps to do is put folks into that pipeline. So for me specifically, probably the most helpful thing was actually my mentorship with Kelsey. So being able to be included in meetings that would not have been accessible to me otherwise, getting put in touch with folks who are really working on policy and journalism and advocacy and media, and being able to be put in connection with all of those people, and being able to be connected to those types of resources so that I could learn and improve my own skill sets was really, really important to me. I'll also say that the meetings that this Scoville organized, not all of them were relevant for me, but I met my current boss at the Center for Civilians in Conflict in a Scoville meeting. She mentioned offhandedly that she was looking for a United States program officer. I did not think I was qualified for the job, just like I didn't think I was qualified for Scoville, and I applied anyway. And I am proud to say that I'm now working largely on civilian harm issues and working to reform United States policy, particularly around security assistance, to try and make sure that frontline communities have more of a voice in the way that United States policy is set up. So I really am very grateful to Scoville for that.
Well, Ari, I'm pleased to hear that you benefited from our relationship, because I certainly learned a lot from you. And in your mention of the mentorship, it really drives home an important point for me, and that's those of us involved in this global community really still continue to learn from the fellows and to be inspired by them and their ideas. So Christopher, I'd now like to come back to you. You're coming to an end in your fellowship. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the biggest lessons you've learned over the past few months, and what from the fellowship do you think you're going to take with you into the next phase of your career?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this and I did a little digging, and So the call for applications states that, quote, the purpose of the fellowship is to provide an opportunity for college graduates to gain practical knowledge and experience by contributing to the efforts of nonprofit public interest organizations working on peace and security issues. And I don't know who wrote it, but kudos to them, because I frankly cannot describe any better the big takeaway from these past 9 months. What does that mean for a future career? So basically, there's a number of ways, a number of directions a Scoville like me could go in order to positively impact nuclear policy from here on out. I could work there on it in federal government. I could be doing research in a think tank, or maybe in a multilateral environment at an international organization. The list goes on. But so along any of these potential avenues, now I know the role of the NGO and civil society in these huge discussions. I know what they are and aren't capable of, not just because someone told me, but because I participated in that process. So just like my Army experience informs me wherever I go, knowing what NGOs bring to the table and tackling some of the world's most pressing problems is something I won't ever forget, and then will also be able to harness in all of my future work.
So exciting. And I know, Christopher, we've been talking about interviews. I remember your interview as well, and have enjoyed watching you go through your fellowship. And I can't wait to see what this next step of your adventure holds for you. Maggie, I want to turn to you really quickly. As one of our newest fellows, you're of course just getting started at WAND, an organization very near and dear to my heart. Historically, a lot of our fellows have actually not spent much time in DC, but you, of course, as a proud Howard alum, went to college here in DC, and so did have some experience here. And I'm curious if you could say a little bit about how the fellowship that you've already experienced in the beginning is beginning to show you a different side of Washington, DC than maybe the one you saw as a student.
Yes, love my HBCU. I'm really sad I missed out on that last year and a half. And just as a side note, a lot of my nuclear experience was remote. So even though I was in DC, not really kind of thing. But Scoville is really one of a once in a lifetime kind of experience. I grew up in a rural town in North Carolina. So I came to DC very much like boots on the ground, just wanted to get into the groove of everything, didn't have a lot of connections. So I thought Scoville, when I started, was just gonna be another one of those, internships as fellowships in the city. If you're familiar with DC at all, I like to call it pushing paper. So all you do is you answer the phone, you take notes, you fill out spreadsheets, and that's pretty much it. But Scoville has not been any of that. And at WAND, in my very short time, I saw Nancy in the chat, I have been able to create my own story. I've been able to contribute to a team. I've really been able to challenge myself in new regions. In college, as I mentioned, was an international business major with a concentration in the Middle East. Now I look at women, feminist foreign policy, and U.S.-China relations. Complete 360, but because of Scoville and the flexibility you get to have, you're able to really put yourself in a new place, and they embrace that. A lot of DC internships really want you to do the same thing. Everything I used to tell my friends, yeah, they all got different names, but we're all doing the same thing. And Scoville is not that situation. I've also been exposed to organizations because of the nature of nuclear national security. It's just a naturally niche kind of thing. It's not as wide as some of these other sectors, such as like healthcare. It's just very niche, very specific kind of skill set. But because I am a Scoville, I know I'm exposed to organizations and people that I would never have been exposed to if I didn't have that title attached to my name, especially as a student in the city, but also as a woman of color in the city. It just doesn't open the same kind of doors when you have those kinds of connections. And just as a plug, I really hope as the first Herbert Scoville Jr. Peace Fellow at Howard that I know of, never met one. I feel like I'm the first. I can expose fellows from my HBCU community to the options and the uniqueness of this fellowship that don't come with some of the other things in the city, and let them know that there is another option of foreign policy. So that's how I feel about Scoville compared to other fellowships.
Thank you so much, Maggie. I really appreciate hearing about that experience, and we're all super proud to see what the next several months of your fellowship holds for you. You've all had such amazing journeys, and it's wonderful to see these different life paths that have led you each to Scoville. I'd really actually love to spend all night talking to you three, but sadly, we're going to need to move on shortly because we're nearing the end. But before we do, there are a lot of people listening tonight, and I'd love for you each to take a minute just to really quickly tell them what you think are the most important reasons to support the Scoville Fellowship. And for any of those prospective Scoville Fellows that we might have watching, why you think they should apply. So Ari, I'd love it if we could start with you, and then after Ari, Christopher and Maggie to bring us home.
Sure thing. So I have been in so many meetings and think tanks and advocacy spaces where every single person went to the same private high school in Manhattan, DC, or San Francisco. And I think Scoville is really doing important work to make sure that there are just a different group of folks in the room who can access and change these policies. So if you're in a position to donate, I'd really encourage you to do so. For people who might want to apply, I did not think that my experience at real jobs was going to count because it wasn't an unpaid internship. And I think I've proven myself wrong there. When I was nannying for 3 kids, I was doing way more difficult stakeholder management than I have to do in coalition meetings today. When I was a graduate instructor teaching history, I got to practice public speaking and getting to work with a lot of different people. When I was entering data at a Spanish language speech pathology lab, I was in a multicultural, multilingual environment. So I just want to encourage everybody out there who might feel like they're not cut out for this, that they don't know enough about arms control, that your experience counts, it matters, and that whatever work that you have or can bring or personal experience you can bring will make your work, your advocacy, and your analysis much more effective.
Yeah, so in terms of supporting the Scoville Fellowship, I would say that you get a lot of bang for your buck. The fellowship, it lasts only 6 to 9 months, but the return on investment continues to give long beyond that. I mean, you can see by the amount of Scoville Fellows who were once like Ari, Maggie, and me, but now decades into their careers, trying to quantify the positive impact they've had on the world through their work, I think would be pretty difficult in a good way. So on a personal note, right? Without having gotten the Scoville Fellowship, maybe I'd be, spending all my time getting my country music career off the ground. Would that be fun? Definitely, but would it contribute much to mitigating global risk of nuclear weapons? For some reason, I doubt that. So instead of doing that, I've been shown the door to the peace and security field, walked through it the past 9 months, and I can now see all the opportunities that lie ahead to have a positive impact for the rest of my career. That's a long time, hopefully. So, we've got to make these investments now in the short term because unfortunately, the problems that Scoville Fellows spend their time addressing are probably going to take lifetimes to solve.
Yeah, I know we're running short on time and not to belabor any of the points that my eloquent fellows have put, but my motto is don't give a voice to the voiceless, but let the people speak. And Scoville really does that. They let people speak on what they believe is what they're passionate about. They let people come to the table and they let people do what they need to do in order to make an impact. You don't have to be, you do not have to be the next department Secretary of Defense or a diplomat in order to be a Scoville Fellow. And you definitely don't have to be those things in order to support the Scoville Fellowship. Every person is looking for something different when you apply, and every foundation is looking for something different when they're looking at grants. But just remember that Scoville is a place to, if you want to do it, if you want to achieve it, if it has something to do with making the world a better place, that's what matters to them, and that is why I support it more than any other fellowship that I've had. So thank you all for letting me speak.
Well, thanks again to Maggie, Ari, and Christopher for joining us today, for sharing your stories. I'm sure listening to the 3 of them has already given you an idea of the incredible impact that the Scoville Fellowship has on peace and security issues. But just to give you a little further taste of the roles that our fellows play in shaping conversations on key issues, you usually have to look no further than your preferred media outlet, as you'll see here from this brief video.
Well, for more of this, I'm joined now from Washington by Shannon Page, Scoville Peace Fellow at Peace Direct and author of the report titled Time to Decolonize Aid. Thank you very much indeed, Sharon, for joining us. Tell us more briefly about the key findings of your report.
So, our report, thank you so much for having me, firstly. And it's a pleasure to be able to talk about this with you today.
Good morning, everyone. It's so great to see all of you here today. My name is Lisa Arias. I'm a Scoville Fellow at CSIS, and I will be moderating this wonderful panel this morning. Before we get started, I do want to take a
Ishan Sharma is Scoville Fellow at the Federation of American Scientists, where he specialises in digital authoritarianism and is the author of the report, A More Responsible Digital Surveillance Future. Welcome to The Real Story, Ishan Sharma. Dissidents matter, but can you think of an example of an individual, or perhaps even a group of individuals, whose actions have been critical to a push for change?
Thanks, Shardula. It's a pleasure being on the show. So I've spent the last few years closely analyzing the emergence and export of certain surveillance technologies. So whether that's the zero-click hacking as mentioned earlier in the show, or
It's pretty amazing everywhere that you find Scoville Fellows speaking, writing, just all over the place. That was incredible. As we reach the end of tonight's program, we wanted to take a few minutes to not just reflect on Scoville's past, as we've been doing throughout the evening, or its present, as we just did in that wonderful keynote, but to also think a little bit about its future. So we have one final video for you tonight with just some thoughts that make on what makes the fellowship so special and how it's helping build a better tomorrow.
I truly don't think I'd be where I am today without the Scoville Fellowship. During undergrad, I learned how to read and write at a collegiate level, but it was the Scoville Fellowship that taught me critical skills to succeed in the workplace. During Scoville, I learned how to communicate effectively, how to build and leverage a network. It sounds cheesy, but it also taught me how to dream big by connecting me to previous Scoville alumni and folks at the Brookings Institution who were so successful and showed me that I can be that successful too. And lastly, it gave me the skills to become a mentor to others. After Scoville, I received an incredible opportunity to work as a legislative staffer on the Hill, and now I'm a researcher at Harvard to a former Secretary of Defense. Long story short, Scoville propelled me forward and gave me more opportunities than I could have previously imagined, and I'm incredibly grateful.
This fellowship was so meaningful for my work because I am an advocate at heart. I am an activist at heart. I really want to create change, and I believe that I am the change, and it starts with me. So this fellowship was instrumental in really helping me see that I could be all those things, that this field did need my background and experience, and that I could provide substantive contributions even at a fairly young age and early on in my career. And I think that really gave me hope for future generations. I think that young people are where change is at. I really believe that having new energy to solve these problems that have gone on for decades, if not, hundreds of years, is really important. And I think Scoville understands that and tries to feed young people into this pipeline so they can make their contributions and be creative with their solutions and think about, what are some things that haven't been tried before that we could try to help produce the change that we want to see. And I know for myself personally, my experience at FCNL encouraged me to start my own nonprofit to help Muslims engage with Congress called Polygon Education Fund. And I was able to really leverage my experience from FCNL to try to create something similar for Muslims and allies in the US. And that's really meaningful to me because until then, Muslims have been the least engaged faith group when it came to engaging with Congress. And I think that need was so there, and this fellowship and my time at FCNL gave me the education and the inspiration and the belief that I could do it and I could contribute to my community as well. So thank you so much for this experience. I'll also say in addition, getting to brief White House staff, getting to brief members of Congress and their staff, getting to talk to the State Department and having them issue a statement based off of an op-ed I had written. It was really meaningful work, and it was so validating that all of this work that I had put into changing my career, into pursuing this fellowship, the long hours, it was all making a difference. And I really appreciate the fellowship for giving me that opportunity.
When I saw the Scoville Fellowship online, I knew right away that I wanted to apply. When I saw the passion that Herbert Scoville showed for the security field and his commitment to mentoring young professionals, a passion that is clearly continued by the board of directors, the host organizations, and the alumni, I knew that this was something special. There aren't many programs who aim to support young professionals in the security and peace building realm, particularly those who don't have extensive experience on the Hill already. So for me, this opportunity demonstrated real stewardship and commitment to the field. They're building bridges for existing and future leaders and investing in those future leaders in the security and peace building realm.
Happy 35th anniversary to the Scoville Peace Fellowship. My name is Kate Gould, and I'm a former board member of Scoville, also a former supervisor of a Scoville Fellow, or the Hallett, when we were both working at the Friends Committee on National Legislation. So I have seen firsthand the way that Scoville helps young people burst through a lot of the barriers that are keeping new and diverse and brilliant voices out of the foreign policy community and ensuring that the peace and security community can welcome those voices and that people can start new, promising, amazing careers in the peace and security field. So happy 35th, and wishing many more happy anniversaries.
From his work in the field of intelligence to his passion for arms control, I think my father, in his characteristic modesty, would have agreed that he could not have predicted the kinds of challenges the world faces today. But I think what would have made him incredibly happy is to see the Scoville Fellows, both in their interviews and then in the work they do in Washington, meeting a whole new set of challenges with the same kind of passion he did.
I can say with confidence that I would not be where I am today if it weren't for the Scoville Fellowship. And since my fellowship has ended, I've wanted to give back to this program. I've mentored fellows, I've supervised fellows, I've attended countless excellent Scoville happy hours to meet with the incoming classes. But I'll admit, I never thought about making a financial contribution until I joined the Scoville board. And now it's become a regular part of my charitable giving because I view sustaining the fellowship as critical to injecting these new ideas and diverse perspectives into the peace and security community. And because I want to ensure that other recent graduates have the same opportunities that I did in 2010. So for those reasons, I hope you'll consider making a tax-deductible contribution to the fellowship so we can look forward to celebrating the next 35 years of fellows. There's a number of ways that you can donate. Donations can be made via the Scoville website, www.scoville.org, via Facebook, or you can send a check. And you'll see in the chat a link to the website and the mailing address. We also hope that you'll consider supporting the fellowship in other ways. We're very committed to creating a diverse and inclusive community. But to do that, we need help publicizing the fellowship and encouraging recent graduates from across the country to apply. Also, if you are an alum of the fellowship, we really appreciate hearing updates from your careers and your accomplishments to help us demonstrate the range of critical contributions that former fellows continue to make. So thank you again for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for your support. And I'll now turn it back over to Stephen to close out our event.
Thank you, Kelsey. It's been such a joy co-hosting this celebration with you this evening. As we close, I'd just like to take a few minutes to say a few thank yous. I'd like to first thank everyone who joined us as a speaker this evening, whether that was live or via video. I'd like to thank our friends at the Altimeter Group who have helped produce this event, especially Scott and Megan, who have truly made all the magic happen. I'd also like to thank Bridget Moix and Darcy Scott, who along with Rachel Stoll and Kelsey have worked tirelessly to make this evening's event happen. And an additional very special thank you to Scoville's amazing staff, Janelle Slowly, and particularly our executive director, Paul Rebson, who work day in, day out to support the fellows and keep the fellowship running. Finally, I'd like to offer a very special thank you once again to the entire Scoville family for their generous gift. For everyone listening tonight, whether you're a friend of the fellowship, a former fellow, or one of our existing supporters, I want to echo Kelsey's words and encourage you to continue supporting the Scoville Fellowship. If you've never made a donation to the Scoville before, tonight's the perfect time to start. Once again, we're putting in the chat the information on how you can make a contribution, or you can be in touch if you want to help and support in other ways. Let me close tonight by thanking all of you one final time for joining us this evening. I've been particularly pleased to see that so many of you spent the entire time with us. That's incredibly rare, and we're deeply grateful that you've spent your evening with us so far. I want to note as we close, after we're done speaking, we'll be showing a video slideshow of our amazing fellows, highlighting some of their experiences throughout the fellowship. This was playing before we joined, so some of you might have seen it then. But if you haven't, we'd love for you to stick around and watch it for a few moments. As always, Scoville Fellows are the true stars of the show. So we hope you'll take a few minutes to watch the video as we once again say congratulations and celebrate 35 wonderful years of the Scoville Peace Fellowship. Here's to many, many more.